Day, everybody, wherever you're joining us from. We're very glad that you are with us. We just have a few housekeeping items before we get started. We have interpretation through all of the session. If you are needing it, there's some instructions here about going to the globe in the bottom right side of your screen and choosing the language that you want to be hearing in. We will be having interventions in different languages. So I do suggest that whatever your language, if you speak English or French or Spanish, you go and do find that language so you can follow along as smoothly as possible. Just letting a few more people come into the room. We don't want to start too late, but at the same time, we want everyone to be joining us who's okay. Let's start with a poll. While we wait these couple of minutes, we want to know a little bit more about you. So if we could launch our first poll, which is asking about your primary area of work. Is it child protection, food security and livelihoods? Is it education? Is it protection? Is it another humanitarian sector? Or do you work generally across humanitarianism and have no one area? I'd ask you to click directly on your screen and let us know a little bit about yourselves. We're going to be talking today, if you've come to this session, hopefully you know a little bit about what it's about. But we have a number of fabulous panelists who are going to be leading us through some of their thinking, their current thinking on food security, excuse me, and protection, and specifically for some of them, child protection. And we decided when we were prepping for this to call it Disrupting Our Ways of Working, because we're really looking at breaking down the silos of humanitarian action and finding new ways, new avenues for collaboration, new steps that we can take together to ensure that we have a better response for all of the affected population. And particularly, we're going to be flagging children and their protection needs. Could we see the result of that poll come up on our screen? There we see it. Everyone should see it. So most of us are child protection actors. There are some general protection actors. There's some of you who are working really across many different areas in humanitarianism. And then we have some from food security, some from education, and a few from one other sector. Great, thank you for that. If you are, we will be going into a breakout room later on. So if you know how to rename yourself, if you are needing translation, if we could ask you to go down to the three dots, find rename, and at the end of your name that appears in your box, if you could put an asterisk. So if you are needing translation, if you could put an asterisk at the end of your name, then we will keep you all together so that we make sure that in the breakout room activity, that there is still interpretation. So I think that's it for our housekeeping, and we'll dive right into our session. So if we could have the next slide, I want to give a little bit of background, kind of set the scene for where we find ourselves. So we know, I think probably all of us who are attending the Alliance meeting and coming to this session, that there is still a challenge that we face in operationalizing the centrality of protection. There is growing understanding and recognition of the importance of protection in our humanitarian responses, but we have yet to really figure out how to do it. And this is particular, if we can see in the next point, particularly around the centrality of children, who, as we know, in many of the operations that we work in, form up to half, occasionally even more than half, of the population. So we have as a challenge to ourselves to really be thinking about the centrality of protection, and particularly the risks and opportunities that children have and that children face. So we know that children's needs are holistic. We can't be dividing their protection needs from their education needs, from their food security needs, from their wash needs. So we need to think about how can we effectively collaborate to improve children's protection and their well-being. And I think we have a number of great examples using food security as the lens in our panelists and in our session today, though we are also wanting to hear from you and as the participants, and what maybe some experience you've had and challenges you've had and solutions that you are in the process of finding and so on. Now, I didn't introduce myself, my apologies. My name is Joanna Wedge. I am facilitating this session, and I come to you as the Child Protection Minimum Standards Working Group's co-lead. The working group is one of the 4 working groups of the Alliance for Child Protection in Humanitarian Action. And within the CPMS, we have a whole pillar of standards that are devoted to working across sectors. And you can see down in the right-hand corner, the icon that we're using for the initiative to really highlight our pillar 4, to be working alongside actors in nutrition, wash, education, etc., to think about how we can really be effectively collaborating going into the future. Right, if we come to the next slide. When we were preparing for this presentation and when we were looking at the marvelous abstracts that came in, we came into the workshop, we decided that we wanted to have one that was grouping around food security and child protection, because we really saw a lot of challenges and a lot of solutions that are being put forward to breaking siloed ways of working. In our Working Across Sectors initiative at the CPMS Working Group, we came up with 7 steps or 7 challenges to ourselves in order to be breaking down the silos and working more effectively together. So let me just quickly run us through some of these. So to have common understanding between sectors in our language, in our culture, in our understanding and framing of what the challenges are, in our understanding of what children bring and the abilities that they have to help themselves and to interact with humanitarian actors and so on. The second one is around coordination and collaboration. And I think that we will see a number of good examples of this, one by having this very forum, but in some of the presentations that you're going to be having, for example, in coordinating and collaborating on joint assessment and joint analysis, which 2 of our speakers will address. Another opportunity for us is to look at our competencies, to look together at what are the skills that we need for enhancing children's protection and for working with each other. So some of that are skills to actually work with each other and to listen to each other. Some of it is around working with children. Not all of us have a background in that, have particular skill in that. So let us be thinking about competency to be working together to more effectively protect children and work with children on their protection. I come from the CPMS background, so you can see that standards indeed are an opportunity for us to work more collaboratively. We sent out, when we revised the CPMS in 2019, we sent our standards to leads in all of the other sectors, and we had feedback from our food security colleagues. And we at the CPMS have also had the honor to feed into revisions and new sets of minimum standards that have been released over the past few years. So we think it's very important that we collaborate at that kind of level. Tools, we'll be hearing about a few of the tools that are in use in other sectors and with protection actors as well. So we see that as a real opportunity to make sure that in the sectoral tools, technical tools, that we reflect and see the key areas where we can be collaborating more effectively. Then in evidence and learning, some of that will be highlighted today in some of the research and ways of working in food security. And we had a session, if you weren't part of it yesterday, we had a session on some of the evidence and learning. So do go back and listen to that session if you can, about working across sectors, the evidence and action. And then finally, a platform that we can create as we try to influence the leadership in our sectors and in humanitarian action writ large around joint advocacy. So to think about how, for example, when we have common coordinated collaboration and so on, how we then need to advocate to our leaders at different levels to ensure that we have the funds to be collaborating, that we're given the time to collaborate, and from the earliest possible opportunity. So if we move on to our next slide, we want to be going to, sorry, actually, before we do that, we have one other poll that we want to learn a little bit more about you. So the poll is about, it can be launched, have you run a project that integrates child protection with another sector? So we're just looking for a yes or no answer. We've got probably about 20, 25 people, technical people, humanitarian staff who are on the session. We would love to hear from you. If you could give us a little click so that we know who we're talking to, how much experience you've had. All right, could we see the results for that? The vast majority of you have indeed run a project that integrates child protection with another sector. So it'll be interesting to hear, maybe in the breakout rooms and so on, which of those sectors it is. Actually, we can, yeah, indeed, put it in the chat here, and we can be looking at that while we move to the next presentation. So I think we have to skip the next slide. If I already had a sneak peek, because we're not going to go to breakout rooms straight away. If we could go to the next one. Yes, so we are going to have a presentation from our colleague, Patricia Ramos. Patricia is a technical manager with World Vision in Venezuela. And as we're exploring at this annual meeting new ways of working, Patricia is going to talk to us about working with faith-based organizations and enabling faith-based organizations to take the lead in children's protection and humanitarian action. So let me pass the floor to Patricia, who's presenting in Spanish. And she will talk us through a little bit how that looks different, how those partnerships look different, and what we can be learning from that more largely. Patricia, over to you.
Buenos días, muchas gracias, Joana. Soy Patricia Ramos, World Vision de Latinoamérica. Y los invito a ver el siguiente video para saber de qué estamos, motivarlos y saber de qué estamos hablando. Adelante.
He trabajado con los niños y ha sido una experiencia muy bonita de verdad. Esto nos generó mucha unión en la comunidad.
Me sentí súper y dije que me cayó del cielo porque compartí más con mis niños, por la broma de que no, la pandemia, que no estaba yendo a clase ni nada.
Ellos se motivan mucho porque se emocionan porque es de nosotros lo estamos haciendo.
Esto le ha dado un sentido de pertenencia a los niños y sé que esto no lo van a olvidar nunca, porque ellos van creciendo y ellos se van dando cuenta de que como dice la Biblia, lo que se instruye al niño en su camino, que cuando fuere viejo no se apartará de él, de tal manera que lo que uno le enseña a ellos aquí hoy, pues eso le va a quedar siempre. Y así como la semilla pues tiene un proceso para que dé fruto, así también es en la vida. Pues.
De esa misma semilla de caraota y sembré un kilo ya.
sino que nosotros le estamos sembrando esa semilla de pertenencia a ellos. O sea, estamos devolviéndosela, ¿verdad? De tal manera de que ellos puedan entender que el día de mañana, ya cuando quizás tengan su hogar, ellos van a saber que ellos pasaron por esto.
Cuando mi abuela no estaba ni mi mamá, yo regaba las matas, sembraba y ver de qué tamaño estaba la semilla. Entonces yo las regaba, yo le echaba agua. Ella también. ¿Qué sembraste tú?
A través de la siembra, sembramos en los niños ese sentido de pertenencia, de amar la tierra.
Porque nosotros prácticamente somos solos. Y ellos al ver unas personas así, que nos toman en cuenta, ellos se motivan más, pues. Y el niño más que todo, el varoncito, que mamá, vamos para la siembra, mamá, las maticas tan grandes, mamá, ya dio uno. Es algo bonito. Porque yo digo que como eso viene de parte de Dios, que nos están ayudando a nosotros tenemos que ayudar a otras personas más. Con amor y cariño todo se da.
Gracias. Bueno, y entonces hoy vamos a ver cómo un espacio renovado en las organizaciones basadas en la fe para abordar la protección. Y de qué se trata y cómo llegamos aquí, ¿no? Vamos a verlo. World Vision está en Venezuela desde el año 2019 y desde nuestros primeros trabajos hemos visto que una canasta alimentaria no minimiza ni palia el hambre de la familia más vulnerable, ¿no? También hemos visto cómo las familias tienen sus mayores niveles de confianza en las organizaciones basadas en la fe, ¿sí? Y con mucho temor también hemos observado cómo el trabajo infantil y el ausentismo escolar ha incrementado terriblemente en aquellas casas donde escasea la comida día a día, ¿sí? Con el agravante de ser normalizado por el resto de la sociedad. Definitivamente, pues esto nos aleja a cada uno de estos niños venezolanos de la vida a plenitud a futuro y en la vida de toda su familia. Con este enfoque y con esta situación, pues estuvimos pensando cómo transitar a una solución más sustentable, ¿no? En la respuesta humanitaria que estamos brindando. Y en esta idea surgió los huertos domésticos. La idea es tener un terreno cerca de casa donde ellos puedan tener un cultivo de ciclo corto y complementar su dieta diaria, sin necesidad de trasladarse grandes distancias. Con esta idea en mente, estuvimos analizando quién podría ser nuestro socio, ¿no? Quién nos podría acompañar en llevar esta tarea. Y definitivamente encontramos a Funda Crecer, que es una organización basada en la fe con la cual ya nosotros teníamos algún contacto. Habíamos hecho entregas de canastas alimentarias juntos con ellos y especialmente lo habíamos formado en protección de la niñez a través del programa Crianza con Ternura, que es una metodología de World Vision para llegar a cada uno de ellos ese mensaje. El balance de este programa es que cada una de los miembros contribuyeron y entre todos conformaron una política de protección de la niñez que en estos momentos es vivida por cada uno de sus miembros, por cada uno de sus voluntarios. Otro elemento importante que nos llamó la atención para seguir considerando esta organización basada en la fe, que se llama Funda Crecer, es su localización. Vamos a hacer un vuelo rasante para que vean dónde está ubicada Funda Crecer. Entonces, en Venezuela, muy cerca de la ciudad de Caracas, la capital, ¿no? Labora Funda Crecer. Ella está enfocada en los municipios Carrizal, el municipio Los Alias y Guaycaipuro. Fíjense lo cerca que está de Caracas y que si lo miran es una zona montañosa. Esta ventaja que tiene Fundacrecer con estas localizaciones permite que tengan en su seno, dentro de sus miembros, gente del área urbana, gente del área rural, gente periurbana, ¿no? Y tienen cada uno, a muchos de sus miembros, espacios suficientes para llevar a cabo este proyecto de huertas comunitarias, a través, en este caso, de huertas domésticas. Y así le dimos forma entonces a un proyecto para atender 310 familias, es decir, estructurar 310 huertos domésticos. Cada una de estas familias, pues con integración de bastantes niños, una carga importante de la infancia, y el proyecto se complementó con entrega de canasta alimentaria en sus primeros 3 meses, una cada mes, para poder compensar este tiempo que ellos estaban dedicando a la huerta, ¿no? Además, los insumos necesarios mínimos agrícolas y el acompañamiento técnico. Lo interesante de este proyecto es que en sus hallazgos iniciales empezamos a observar que los padres, en general, los adultos, tenían especial interés por involucrar a los niños y adolescentes en las actividades asociadas al proyecto. No solamente eso, sino que los niños evidenciaban inmensamente ese interés por participar. Y fíjense lo que les comento, esta foto es tan ejemplificante como la madre le cede el puesto principal al niño en la atención que en ese momento estaba requiriendo de Fundacrecer, ¿no? Es en la entrega de algunos insumos. Los niños entonces voluntariamente se incorporaron a cada una de las actividades. ¿Qué nos llevó a esto? A pensar en que deberíamos de aprovechar esta ventana de oportunidad para entonces hacer acento en la protección, no solamente porque verlo como una vía para trabajar sobre la protección, sino precisamente para protegerlos. Se pensó en ese momento de hacer unos cambios en los proyectos, en este proyecto en particular, ¿no? El primero, pues entonces, de orden conceptual, es utilizar este proyecto que inicialmente era de orden alimentario, ¿no? De complementar la dieta alimentaria, utilizarlo como un vehículo de protección. Y en el orden operativo lo que hicimos fue que se entrenó al personal de Fundacrecer en las relaciones con los niños, en hacer acento en cómo identificar en este tipo de actividades a algunas alertas tempranas, bien de trabajo infantil o de ausentismo escolar. Y el otro cambio interesante que hicimos en el proyecto fue incorporar una sistematización de la experiencia desde los niños, niñas y adolescentes. Se hizo el diseño y se aplicó a lo largo del proyecto, ¿no? Cómo veían y cómo iban entendiendo los niños, niñas y adolescentes este proyecto que ellos estaban viviendo y llevando adelante. De esta manera, entonces, el proyecto que partió con una centralidad en un huerto doméstico amplió su efecto y amplió su cartera con la mirada de la niñez y con la incorporación activa de la niñez. Las actividades se siguieron surgiendo y pudimos evidenciar que el 99% de los participantes de las familias participantes, adoptaron estrategias para integrar activamente a los niños y niñas de manera voluntaria. En este caso, nosotros lo que hicimos fue acompañarlos en las iniciativas que ellos estaban teniendo, orientarlos y estar avisores, ¿no? De cualquier situación. En ningún momento, pues, vimos que desatendieran sus actividades escolares. Desde el punto de vista del ciclo de proyecto, el proyecto siguió su ciclo habitual, el ciclo que teníamos diseñado, y el haber hecho esos cambios en la incorporación de los niños no propició alteración ni en sus costos ni en las actividades, salvo los pequeños ajustes que lógicamente tenían que implicar. Las tareas de sistematización en especial se acoplaron muy bien a las tareas de monitoreo, y las tareas de aprendizaje con los niños y de observación se acoplaron muy bien en todas las actividades de capacitación y seguimiento técnico. De esta manera, pues entonces, pudimos ver también una cosa interesante, todos los riesgos que vivieron, los retos que vivieron cada una de las familias a lo largo del proyecto. Estaban de distintas escalas, desde la escala de que estábamos en un asunto de COVID, en un entorno de COVID, en un entorno de baja movilidad, y a nivel de cada una de las familias, pues las discusiones que tenían o las confrontaciones al verse con los retos propios agrícolas. Nos llamó la atención que en la mayoría de los casos las soluciones más creativas siempre vinieron de parte de los niños y los adolescentes. En todo caso, se constató que se tomaban decisiones familiares y propuestas familiares, ¿no? Entonces, de esta manera vimos que al final, a pesar de todos los retos, el 99% de las familias completaron el proyecto. Y hoy día siguen manteniendo su huerto familiar. Nosotros nos retiramos, ¿no? Ya, porque el proyecto ya ha terminado, pero pudimos evidenciar este crecimiento en el tejido familiar, este crecimiento en el aprendizaje tanto para nosotros de World Vision desde la parte del ciclo de proyecto como para Fundacrecer, para tener mayores herramientas y tratar abarcar todos los puntos de protección y ejercerlos, y por supuesto en la mejora de la calidad de vida con los mejores alimentos para los niños. Esto pues es muy corto el tiempo para explicarlo en detalle, pero sabemos que está documentado y especialmente queremos mostrarles cómo está documentado a través de los propios niños, niñas y adolescentes. Con esto pues pudimos evidenciar que un proyecto que parte desde la asistencia alimentaria ha crecido, se ha expandido, y entonces a través de este plato de comida hemos sembrado confianza y cultivado esperanza. Adelante. Muchísimas gracias por su atención.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Patricia, for your work or for highlighting the work of your team, because I know that it's a number of people who've been working on this project for so long, and that you wrapped up. So just reflecting a little bit on what you said of thinking about those linkages between food security and child labor, or the prevention of child labor, how you talk about participation of children. I thought that was quite an interesting aspect of the community orchards. And I reflect back on a presentation yesterday that looked at the linkages between food security and children's mental health and well-being. And when you talk about there being hope, that there being trust, these are some of the fundamental aspects of positive mental health. So lovely to have that presentation from you, and we'll have a chance for some questions in a little bit. I want to now pass the floor to two other colleagues. I'm going to be introducing to you Boris Aristin Gonzalez, who heads up protection analysis at the Global Protection Cluster. Boris, is that the first time you've been called Morris? I don't know, maybe.
I only can tell you that I am the one in El Salvador, but the last week I was in Guatemala, and I invited 4 colleagues to Starbucks for a coffee. They wrote in 4 different ways my name, so it's not a problem.
It was more my enunciation, but maybe in my mind, forever now, you'll be Morris.
Boris is fine.
And Leila Tazi is a programs policy officer and a protection focal point with the World Food Program. So you two have been collaborating for a little while now between the World Food Program and the Global Protection Cluster, and you've decided to focus on the need to improve our joint analysis. So let me turn the floor over to you to talk about how you did that, but also about what your initiative can teach us specifically in child protection as we go forward in more collaborative ways.
Thank you very much, Joanna. And thank you very much for your introduction, because I think it speaks very well to what the aim of this work stream is, namely a common understanding, building a common understanding between sectors to ensure that we operationalize the centrality of protection. That is one of the key aims of this work stream, and also enhancing how we complement each other from different sectors. So I'll start presenting the problem statement that then brought us to the realization that we had to collaborate more closely, and Boris will present more concrete examples of how we made that happen. If I can have the next slide, please. So one of the main realizations is that despite the need and the realization that we need the centrality of protection, the reality is that organizations working in the field have relatively narrow mandates, which doesn't allow them to really grasp the complexity of the risks that populations are facing. Of course, here we're talking about protection, but this applies very much to child protection in particular too. And so the fact that children, but populations in general, are affected by a multiplicity of risks. So it's not just about food security, of course, or questions directly linked to child protection, but a very complex and correlated risks. And the need to really integrate a comprehensive approach to analysis. So there's a lot of assessment, joint assessment tools, but how do we really build the analysis together to really be able to comprehend the risks and the threats that populations are exposed to? Because with this narrowness of mandates, there is a big impact on also the way that humanitarian response is going to be designed. Can I ask you for the next slide, please? So what usually happens, and thankfully not in the example that Patricia presented, which actually is a very beautiful example of how we can really build between sectors and have other types of outcomes than the initial ones that we designed for, is that usually protection programs tend to overlook the realities of hunger. They tend to focus specifically on protection risks, but not see the people in their entirety and all the trade-offs that people are putting to actually to reduce their risks and their food insecurity. And the same on the other side of the medal, let's say, that food assistance usually is quite narrow again, is very focused on that specific outcome and doesn't look at the people that we serve in their entirety. And again, those trade-offs and the tensions and the compromises that populations do to actually handle their food security. And the way that food security scores are rated do not take that into account. Food security scores do not take into account what people had to trade off to actually have maybe a better score, let's say, in terms of food security. So that is the problem statement, which then took us to create this work stream. I'll pass on to Boris to give us more concrete examples of how we operationalize this.
Leila, thank you so much, and thank you so much to everyone for showing interest on this discussion. And the next slides are going to be showing you some case studies. Oh well, maybe we can just start with some of the aspects now regarding what is the work stream that we have initiated, because it's for protection and it's also for all the different areas of responsibility. As you know, and if you have been working in the analysis in the field, what we do with areas of responsibility and the protection cluster is to foster and to really work together, as we are doing at the moment in all the 3 countries of North Central America, to make a joint analysis. And that recalls me to one of the comments from Joanna at the beginning and the child protection minimum standards. Myself, I used to work in the area of responsibility during the time that they were produced. And just the introduction of that section of the minimum standards, if you remember, Joanna, it took like 1.5 years of more, no? The difference between mainstreaming, integration, etc. And now we have a very solid and consolidated document so that we are inviting you to use and to keep considering as reference. But when Joanna was showing you the pillars about breaking the silos, I think that this work stream is very much connected with the evidence and learning and with the coordination and collaboration. And both of them, they go very much together. If we collaborate, if we exchange, as we are going to show the different case studies that we have been developing during 2022, you will see that when you put the partners, the key actors together is when we have very good outcomes. And that's why the Global Protection Cluster has one working group, which is the one of information and analysis. And we decided to make a work stream on food security and protection. And always that we talk as protection, always think about child protection, gender-based violence, mine action, and HLP, together with the other topics, protection topics that they don't conform one specifically, one area of responsibility. And what we are doing as a work stream is to move towards a more comprehensive, integrated and rounded, and more effective joint analysis and response program. We were having several initiatives in the past, and now what we are talking about is not about trying to influence with protection aspects, the food security, data collection and analysis, or vice versa. Is much more of, if we have very good tools, if we have a system already in place, and that happens systematically with our respective constituencies, let's keep working. And then, or during the process, let's sit together. The examples, they are going to be from different protection analysis updates that they have been recently published, but I will give you one that happened last week in Guatemala itself during the joint analysis sessions, including the colleagues from food security. And again, it focuses on the analysis. And if we have a joint analysis and a common understanding, ideas and initiatives, as the one that Patricia was showing within her own organization, with the same logic, it will happen. And that's why we are very much open to have the collaboration from the different range of partners, NGOs, national and international, and stakeholders to collaborate in this process. At country level, it happens within the protection and area of responsibility coordination mechanism, and at global level, we are very much welcoming to membership. At the moment, as we speak, and considering that this work stream was established in January, let's say, late December last year, but in January 2022, we have the Global Protection Cluster, International Rescue Committee, Plan International, and WFP as key partners of the work stream, which is ongoing on continuous basis. If we can move to the next slide. Thank you. And just for showing you, and I will not start sharing with you all the percentages and the data, which will make the presentation very boring, but let's give a couple of tips about what happened when we worked together. You know, regretfully, around mid-February 2022, it was an important attack from armed groups to the IDP camps in the Ituri province in Congo. And we decided to make an analysis, but also an advocacy note, which goes together regarding the situation that was happening in the Ituri province. That was happening where, in the meanwhile, that with Leila and the rest of colleagues of WFP, we were discussing about how to organize this work stream. And we had the right person from WFP, and we had the right people from protection, also with the support of the Global Protection Cluster, to introduce as a protection risk also food insecurity. And here you have the result. And what we were doing, it was just, this is a good example from the IPC, the ranking system that WFP has, and is one of the landmarks of the humanitarian analysis. And in the work of the protection analysis update, we were making this joint analysis considering data. And when you put it together, you realize that the most affected areas by violence are also those ones that they are affected by more chronic food insecurity. That it became a set of recommendations that they are included in the PAO. All these documents, they are available for everyone, and recommendations about keep sitting together and keep fostering this integration. One of the big outcomes, because sometimes as we are always working in silos, we have the people, our teams, our field colleagues, initially they don't understand it. They believe that food security is a silo, protection is a silo, or we believe that child protection is a silo, and that has to be broken. We need to broken in a smooth way. We need to ensure and to foster interaction. In these initial steps, we were questioning about why food security is integrated in this protection analysis, because protection analysis is protection, no? When they started to see the results, here you have it. It's very clear, and it's really fostering We are at the initial steps with the joint analysis and the evidence, but then we keep fostering the collaboration and the coordination. And we hope that we will have an integrated approach, as the introduction of the minimum standards reflects. Integration is when we look forward for implementing joint outcomes. If we move to the next slide, here we have the same. It's not by chance that the highest percentage of people with in food insecurity are also with the displaced population, and also in the situations where the IDP camps, they are getting close in Eastern Congo. If you see again, is how simple, and as soon as you introduce the topic and you dedicate a minimum time with the colleagues, the joint analysis starts to happen. Again, in Nigeria, for the Borno state, one of the recommendations is to keep getting deeper into the linkages between food insecurity, displacement, violence, etc. And if we go to the next one, in Sudan, we have the same analysis where we have highest rates of violence. We have the pending question of in Darfur of the durable solutions, etc. You will see that the IPC, the level is level 3 in terms of food insecurity, and is affected, and also in northeast Sudan. So there is always a correlation between the areas that protection considers as priority and food insecurity considers as priority. And it's the question of food security has an incredible tool already defined, which is widespread all across the countries, and is a clear reference for taking decisions and at a strategic and operational level. That it is, and we are supporting Leila's team also to introduce some aspects about having a better comprehension of protection at the time of collecting and analyzing data, but the use of this data for protection purposes and the use of the protection analysis framework and rationale for the IPC, this cross-fertilization between sectors is what we found extremely useful. And if we go to the next, which is another example, is the one of northern Ethiopia, where the displacement matches regretfully also with the highest rates of food insecurity. These are examples, and we will be very happy to go into the details about how it was the rationale, which kind of data and approach we were taking, but let me finalize with one additional example, which is the analysis that we were doing last week, until yesterday in Guatemala. And in Guatemala, it was if you have a look to the humanitarian response over there, you will read two priorities: natural disasters. Yes, Guatemala ranks 4th in the across the most prone countries to suffer natural disasters. Between 1996 to 2022, they have faced 15 high natural disasters. There are continuous, but from volcanoes, earthquakes, hurricanes, etc. And it was also like the mythification of one area called the dry corridor in Guatemala, where the food insecurity was the highest. That was the rumor. That was like what you were talking in the country. That was making that the protection actors, they were thinking that they should focus the protection response all across protection and areas of responsibility into the dry corridor as priority for the country. When you have a look about the evolution of the food insecurity and analysis since 2017 in Guatemala, you will see that yes, the dry corridor is a priority area. Leila is level 3, but 60% of the country all across is also level 3. So just to put that on the table, when we started the discussions like 13th, 14th of June, the narrative it was the dry corridor should be a priority. As soon as we started the collaboration with the food security colleagues, and we brought the IPC into the table and we integrated it into our own severity scale, severity ranking, all the constituency realized that we are not talking only about 13% of the country, we are talking about 60% of the country under level 3 of food insecurity. And that really helped us to change the perspective. And now at the moment, the colleagues that they are finalizing the production of the narrative, they have changed the approach about how they need to be focusing and addressing protection, and also to foster the collaboration with food security actors. I will stop here, colleagues, but very happy to discuss any aspect on detail.
Thanks so much, Boris. Leila, do you want to say a few words to wrap up?
No, thank you. I think we're good, and we will have a bit of space during the breakout rooms, if anything. And also, if any organizations are willing to collaborate also on this work stream, we will leave our contact, Boris and I. Thank you.
Perfect, thank you. And as Leila has mentioned, we're going to go into breakout rooms in a few minutes, and you'll have a chance perhaps to have Boris or Leila in your room to ask any questions, but we're going to generate questions to come back to have a general Q&A. Before we do that, though, we have a fourth presenter. But before even maybe we get to Marcello, I'm going to invite you at the halfway point to stretch up and to do a little reach over, little movement of the fingers. That's it, Boris. Moving there to kind of keep us flexible as we go through these 3 days of the Global Alliances meetings. For those of you who've been in many sessions, I'm sure your body's getting a little bit stiff. So give it some love. That's it. Give it a little bit of love, all those joints. All right, let us come to our last speaker. And it's great pleasure. Someone who I see at every annual meeting, but unfortunately don't see outside of this, Marcello Viola. Is the protection advisor for Street Child. His little intro is going into your chat box. Marcello, we've been looking at ways to disrupt the silos in which we work. And I know that at Street Child, I think particularly in Ghana, you've been leading the way, and in other of your locations about breaking down those silos, particularly with food security. That's easier said than done, and I'm sure you have a number of lessons that you can learn, but I'm wondering if you can explain some of the opportunities you found in doing this work, some of the obstacles and the solutions that you've come up with, and particularly how it's related to kind of your interaction with donors and how you've been able to fund or not fund this more integrated approach to working.
Yeah. Thank you very much, Joanna. It's nice to be here. As you say, like to have this kind of work, you know, we need funding for integrated work, but it's easier to be said than done. In fact, when we did the initial Mentimeter, I think it was also interesting to see how many are coming from the donor group, in addition to, you know, the kind of sector people are working in. Maybe something we could consider at the end. You know, there is a general agreement in principle, but it's not often translated into practices when designing a program, because donors have their own objectives, their own priorities. As child protection agencies and practitioners here, I think we should continue advocating for funding for you know, developing more integrated work that have improved protection and child protection outcome. As also Boris said, and as we just saw, the majority of humanitarian emergencies are also mainly protection crisis. So this should be clear. For me, like, what is required here is to ensure that we have funding for expertise or experienced personnel for child protection, who have the capacity to provide those services that are in line with the global standard, with the child protection minimum standard, and to monitor the quality of the implementation. Also funding for protection activities that are for and with the children. I'm thinking of activities like MHPSS for children, but also, as we saw these days, also for parents. Maybe the use of conditional cash to promote positive behavioral change, among other activities. And most important, I think, also allowing prevention work rather than only response, with the confidence that, you know, there are already enough evidence of the benefits. We can continue, you know, these are platforms that we have to bring more evidence, but I think, you know, we already heard a lot, and a lot is there that could influence donor decision. And also, I think it is important to provide additional funding and also time to work together strategically to develop common framework, you know, those templates, those tools, those packages that can capture better this integrated outcome, as it is now happening between the global protection and the global food security and livelihood cluster, as we just heard. Street Child has a model that is already built as an intersectoral approach that requires integration across different sectors. And one action is more effective if it goes hand by hand with the others. As many agencies here, I saw that we are a lot coming from child protection. We have a child-centered approach that requires increased capacity of the caregivers, of the communities, of the schools, and also other systems, including the government, to support the children in being safe, in being schools, and in their learning. So we work with local organizations implementing programs that are built around the area, mainly of education, child protection, and livelihood. But also we acknowledge that children have a range of other needs, and hence we integrate with other sectors as health, hygiene, nutrition, and others basically as required, especially when possible, in terms of capacity, in terms of funding, in terms of available partners, and also when we are best positioned to do so. I say it is too often very articulated to find funding that allows this kind of work, but always need to seek individual fund for the different component, no? To build our puzzle. I see that we become sometimes for those also that need to raise fund, we become a kind of acrobats and equilibrists in the circus, trying to keep all these pieces together. But the reality is that often there's no alignment with the timeline of a fund or the location of implementation. So eventually you can't really have the full package in one community or for one family. Too often we are told that we can ask to other donors to complement, or maybe during implementation we can refer to other agencies in other sectors when we need specific services. But we also know that often this is not really effective. It depends from many variables. Personal experience is often that even within the child protection sector, when reaching some key donor of child protection and maybe trying to bring livelihood component that are an alternative to cash for protection, I hear like that is not possible because that is, you know, it's mainly from the food security and livelihood sector. So I should try to deal with those donors. I think, you know, the food security and livelihood sector and the child protection have many interconnection. We have, I think, for time's sake, I can go fast on the theory of change, but you know, there's so many linearity of, you know, like loss of livelihood that brings to low level of food security, that leads to increased adoption of negative coping strategies, and bring parents to affect, you know, they're affected on their mental health and their physical health, and this is what increased the risks for those negative coping mechanisms. Now, of course, this sequence that we see here is not really so linear, but it's very interconnected and complex. There is interconnection among the risk factors, the causes, and the consequences. So, you know, this framework might be more complex and interlinked. Now, in 2019 and 20, so before COVID, and a few years ago, a couple of years ago, we were able to catch the interest of a food security and livelihood donor, presenting our livelihood package. This is what I was selling, let's say, in a very cynical way. That was mainly around the income generating activity that was aligning with the donor interest in reducing reliance on food aid. Now, through this fund, we were able to mainstream some child protection activity rather than be fully integrated. And we had to negotiate a lot. Now, if we see about this program, we have a full package of services for food security and livelihood that were included: the cash grant, coaching and counseling for incentivized saving scheme to support the caregivers to develop sustainable source of livelihood. We include the setup of the VSLA, the Village Saving and Loan Association, the provision of voucher for food. There was also a component of nutrition with social and behavioral change session that was increasing the knowledge of the pregnant and lactating woman on child nutrition. So the first challenge we encountered, but was solved was about how to select the beneficiaries. We introduced the additional criteria on the tool from the donor and partner that had a little bit more focus on the children. For instance, to look at how many children were in the household, how many were girls, how many were out of school or unaccompanied or separated, and how many meals the children were eating per day. The second challenge was, as I say, not having enough funding to carry on child protection activity like case management or, for instance, psychosocial support for children. Now, the saving group and the social and behavioral change session were for us our entry point to do more activities with the caregivers. So we use a combination of community awareness to have a minimum knowledge to identify and report risks, and also to promote positive parenting. As I say, we didn't have enough for other direct activities, and this was a limitation. Now, briefly, for time's sake, I say we already have enough evidence out there. I can share some of those key protective factors that have been contributing, strengthening the child's safety net and well-being. So by the end of the project, we saw an increase of 87% among caregivers that were reporting capacity to save, and an increase of 64% of households that were able to move from only 1 or 2 meals per day to a normal situation of 3 meals per day. So removing a key stressor for the parents. Both saving capacity and the increased food consumption gave better chances for caregivers to spend more on other important aspects, especially on medical expenses and school fees. I think great results were also coming from the nutrition component that will have a long-lasting impact on the child health and growth. And finally, 79% of children interviewed reported their perceived improvement of relationship with their parents, while 62% report an improved well-being and self-esteem as the likely consequence of living in a more nurturing environment. This was measured by adapting the well-being assessment tool and ask only around those few domains that were around well-being and resilience that were more under control of this project based on the activity. Now, if this initiative was coming through an integrated or multisectorial fund, we could have likely had the chance to strengthen the common theory of change and the logical framework, incorporating child protection tools that would have allowed to explore more the impact of food security and livelihood component on child protection, risk prevention, for instance, on, I don't know, child labor or early marriage. I think that addressing the Sustainable Development Goal 1 and 2 for no poverty and zero hunger that are normally within the food security and livelihood focus will contribute or are necessary to sustainable goals like 3 and 16.2 on good health and well-being and all form of violence against children. That is more within our sphere of interest. So despite this challenge, we saw and can reflect more on how, for instance, child-friendly, in a simple language, how child-friendly space could help the parents to have time to go and collect the voucher for food or to focus on their business. Or maybe providing food or means of livelihood while children are under case management would ensure that comprehensive or holistic package for the child. So eventually, the two are supporting each other. Now, since all these protection activities are so integral, we can see that we need donors to commit to provide resources for child protection to address all these interrelated issues in line with this integrated theory of change, to see happier family where children can grow better and healthier. So I think there will also be a benefit over the value for money, because there is also more efficient use of resources and reduce operational cost. If we can reach some minimum desired result with minimum resources, as this was, I think we can do much more or better with more dedicated funding. Otherwise, we could, as a child protection practitioner, continue to learn the skills about acrobats and in the circus to put that puzzle together. Thank you very much.
Fantastic, Marcello. Thank you for the theory of change that you presented, the research that's come out of it, you know, and it strikes me how much we have to be adaptable and flexible, and how much we have to respond to the realities that are presented when there is funding and also when there isn't funding, but we still see opportunity for making these integrated changes and so on. So I think it's a great example that you've presented for us. We're now going to move to breakout rooms. People are going to be assigned randomly unless you have asked to stay in this main room because you would like interpretation, in which case you will stay with myself and Patricia. Otherwise, you will be moved to, or you have to accept, I think, the movement to a room with either Marcello, Leila, Boris, or my colleague Sandra. And we're going to be asking 2 questions, which I think should be on the next slide, or maybe we've lost them a little bit. They'll come up in the chat. There will be a Jamboard for you to put up some ideas. The first one is, will you share any opportunities for action or further reflection that have been triggered by the session so far? So what opportunities do you see for us to move forward in these integrated ways, particularly with food security? And then we generate questions for us to talk about or to get answers from the presenters or from each other. So what are 2 questions you as a group have for one or more of the speakers? And then finally, if you have any practical resources that you're missing to do this work, this collaborative work more effectively, could you let us know by some Post-it notes? So please use the Jamboards that are provided for each room. You have 10 minutes, and then we will bring you back. All right, we'll have a group of about 5 or 6 practitioners, I think, staying in this room. But we will give our colleagues some time to exit to the other room. And please, those of you who are staying here, do find the Jamboard link in the, being shared with us on the screen. We're lucky to find the Jamboard link in the chat. Please go there so that you can directly put in your questions, your opportunities that you see for us to move forward, and also any resources you think are missing that maybe one of the actors here or myself through the CPMS working group at the Alliance might be able to say, oh, it does already exist. Let us provide it to you, or let us co-create it with you or the sector writ large. Right, I'm going to assume I can see, I guess, who's left in the room. I can see people I don't know. So I see Claudia, I see Matthew, I see Mac, which I don't know if that's a Mac, and Mac is in an iPad, or ourselves. I see Stephanie, Patricia, and then that might be it. I think that everyone else might be technical in the background, but if not, please feel free to speak up as we go. So people are writing, which is great. Practical conversations with donors. This is an opportunity or a reflection. Don't know if whoever put that would like to speak to it briefly.
That was me. I think it's an opportunity, but a question might be like, how to do it in a genuinely like a useful, forward-moving way. You know, like how to make that kind of conversation actually genuinely helpful and useful, and less maybe abstract.
How to have practical conversations with donors. Okay, an opportunity and a question. Okay, thank you, Stephanie. Anyone else have a reflection or a question that you would like to put to the sectors, to the speakers, or so on? Again, I'm not finding it hard to look at my Jamboard and see who is still with us. Let's see, I probably can do it. So there's something in the chat box.
En el chat habían dos preguntas, yo las copié.
Okay. Okay, so we can put them up here as well.
A ver, que las voy a poner en castellano. Si quieres, te las dicto y tú se las traduzcas para que las coloque en inglés, para que los puedan ver mejor.
I think it's fine if she wants to write it in Spanish. Yeah, sure.
Ok. Vamos a ponerlo. Sí, mejor. No, ya yo tomé nota para responder.
Super. Any other challenges or, one of the things that we talked about yesterday are misunderstandings between the sectors. So I'm wondering what are misunderstandings that protection has about food security and that food security may have about protection or child protection. Could someone write that up on the Jamboard for me? Because for some reason I closed my Jamboard. Because I know that, Leila spoke to it a little bit at the beginning of her presentation, but I wonder if there's, some more thinking or more reflection that we should do, those of us who are in child protection, about how we come across, our assumptions about others, their assumptions about us. We think they know, but they don't know. So yeah, to me that is one of the interesting questions.
I put that sticky up there. Did that capture what you were trying to say about sort of assuming things of each other and misunderstanding things? Is that?
Yeah, I think that it does. Thank you. Yeah. Any opportunities that people can think? It could be at the global level, it could be at the regional level, it could be within your organization, because I know that some people here are in very large organizations that have multiple sectors. And I think one of the points, and maybe this can be a reflection, maybe I can figure out how to get my own reflections up on here, but reflections around Patricia talking about faith-based organizations. Many local actors, whether that's an NGO or not, they don't see these divisions the way that we have created them in the humanitarian structure. So I think that's an opportunity that local actors, it maybe goes with the localization agenda that let us see ourselves more as we are seen at the community level, at the recipients level, and so on. I don't know if that resonates with others. Trying to think kind of what my wording is. So this could be an opportunity to be more realistic. I don't think that's quite the right word. Be more humble, maybe. Yeah. Patricia, were you left with other questions when you finished when you closed out the Community Orchard project? Was there a next phase that you wish you could have gone on with or delved deeper?
Sí. Sí, de hecho ya vamos para una segunda fase porque pudimos escalar incorporando entonces ahora hasta la parte de comedores, ¿no? Entonces la idea ahora es escalar en proyectos propiamente comunitarios, como cada quien ya vivió la experiencia desde el punto de vista familiar, se sienten ya como capacitados para subir un nivel y trabajar en comunidades, con huertos comunitarios, y se está impulsando entonces que los productos de ese huerto comunitario vayan a un comedor comunitario. Entonces logramos negociar una segunda parte de este proyecto o una segunda versión mucho más ampliada y escalada. Ahora llegamos hasta el último eslabón de la seguridad alimentaria, incorporando desde el principio ya esta visión de la niñez y la sistematización de la experiencia. Adelante.
Could we encapsulate that somehow as an opportunity for, moving forward into into a post-it? In Spanish is fine.
Bueno, la oportunidad hay la oportunidad de escalar el proyecto a toda la cadena alimentaria, desde la siembra a la mesa.
Right.
Y esto arropa entonces otros sectores como el sector educación.
So interestingly, in your project, there was work obviously within child protection, food security. Was there explicitly in the first round work with education, mental health, maybe physical health too? I don't know.
No, en el primer proyecto solamente se trabajó la capacitación técnica y fue básicamente como una observación de cómo iban tratando los padres a los niños, ¿no? porque ahí ya se nos escapaba mucho del proyecto. Entonces era como una alerta y como una observación. Lo que hicimos fue bajar el nivel de las capacitaciones a un lenguaje para que los niños también comprendieran, porque ellos asistían a las capacitaciones de huertos.
Good. Okay. I think the other groups are quite small, and I think we've all now come back together. I didn't see the notification, but we're all now back together, which is great. So we have a few minutes to look at some of the, or to hear from you about any of your observations and reflections and so on. And then we'll have a few minutes to ask questions and see what questions have come forward, if any of them are similar, and we can put them to our panelists. Does any group want to talk about an observation, a reflection, an opportunity that you see going forward?
Maybe I can start. I was, okay, sorry, I didn't see your hand, Boris. Go ahead, please.
No, we are going to talk about the same, so Marcello, please go ahead.
That's right. We were in the same group eventually, two panelists. There were no external participants. No, there was one. I think we discussed about also like looking at funding opportunity, how to arrive there, in consideration of some of the evidence that are already available. Of course, making a strong case studies, collecting all those evidence together would be one. Probably also learning from the journey that the global education cluster and the child protection, the child protection area of responsibility took to arrive, in a situation where the integration was finally more understood and also supported by donors. Like, of course, maybe that is a sector that is kind of more obvious, the interlink and the relation, but we can start a new journey, and probably there are some of key donors in the area of child protection and food security or livelihood, key agencies that are also donors that could probably open the window, like set the ground by giving the example, by committing in more flexibility in their funding. So probably that could also influence other donors to join or follow this example.
Super, thank you. I know that in our room there was discussion about having kind of practical, I don't know how we reflected it, opportunity and questions about how to have practical conversations with donors once they've been identified, or if you think there's room to grow a donor in that direction, how to have very concrete discussions with them about this approach, and whether it's cost zero and it's just permission to go and do it, or whether there is some initial extra cost. Or I think yesterday we had one donor had told people, well, we're not keen on that because it will mean less reach for food security because it's added activity. So how to have those practical discussions. I don't know, Boris, Leila, Marcello, if you could speak to that kind of concern that donors aren't, that we're not equipped to have those conversations yet.
Couple of very quick thoughts, and not to steal the time for the rest of colleagues, but change of minds takes time. And all across, protection was not very strong in terms of analysis. As we speak about our side of the story, we needed to invest a lot in terms of protection analysis. This is starting to change. And the next step definitely is when analysis finalizes, ends, whatever is advocacy, communications, and keeping system is the next step. Now, one of the initial comments that we were having is that one of the opportunities that we are starting to have now is to convince the humanitarian country team, which once they are convinced, then the decisions they can start just training down the rest of strategic and operational, but goes step by step. Education was not considered a life-saving activity, and the colleagues that they are working from Save the Children with Save the Children, they will remember in 2006, 2007, all the advocacy, global advocacy campaign that we were carrying out, etc. And it took time. Myself, I was very gently invited to leave the room when I was talking to a donor saying, education is part of the humanitarian response. And they smiled and they said, get out of here. So yes, over to you. It takes time, but I think that insistence is very important.
Super. Should we pass anyone else on that point around donors?
Sorry, maybe if I might, when you mention like that, often we are not equipped for such move. Do we speak also about capacity, like you know, looking sharing some experience where for new programs sometimes I've been told that you know, being livelihood a different sector, we might not be able to, you know, to deliver those activities properly, even though as a, you know, when I present the work the organization does, livelihood is a key component. So often, you know, it's like how the evidence of good work can be there. So it's not really a justification, but as well, collaboration, partnership, consortium are you know, like a strategy to bring the different capacity on ground. And then I think also globally there are different organizations that are from the two sectors that are working well together, trying to explore way of synergies, and those consortiums should be promoted, this kind of collaborations.
Super, thanks, Marcello. Leila, did you want to speak to this? Wasn't sure.
No, I just wanted to speak to the collaboration and the enthusiasm of collaborating and maintaining. I think Boris is a very good illustration of maintaining hope and knowing that it's going to take time, and that's about repeating messages and indeed keeping strong between sectors towards donors. And I think that even that approach is very essential. Showing that we're a common front is very essential.
Great point. Sandra, let's turn the floor over to you because you were compiling some questions for us. What were some of the questions that came up in the Jamboards?
Yeah, so there are a few that were around the donors, how to engage donors, the strategy, but I think we kind of spoke to that already. So I would prioritize other questions. So there is one directed to Patricia on, so it seems that in your project, the Home Garden project, there is one of the outcomes was improved relationship between children and caregivers. So the question is, were you able to measure it? And did the project provide any support or guidance to caregivers on how to strengthen the relationship with their children, or did this happen naturally?
Gracias, Sandra. Sí, en la pregunta es sí se pudo medir esa diferencia en las relaciones familiares a través de la sistematización de la experiencia. Esta sistematización fue diseñada por un psicólogo, por una socióloga y trabajadora social. Y buscaban la sistematización no en el sentido de documentar y ordenadamente lo que se iba haciendo en el proyecto, sino de entender cómo el proyecto iba siendo vivido por cada uno de los niños, niñas y adolescentes que participaron. Entonces, ellos con sus instrumentos fueron midiendo, se hizo encuestas, se hizo grupos focales, se hizo dibujos como el de las imágenes que ustedes observaron, y de allí, pues, ellos, su experticia, hicieron ese tipo de análisis. Está documentado, tiene números, y entonces ellos identificaban, por lo menos hay frases como me llevo mucho mejor con mi abuela, ahora hago más caso, ahora soy más grande. Entonces, este tipo de cosas permitió corroborar esas mejoras en las relaciones familiares. No solamente la sistematización brindó eso, también brindó elementos comparativos con otras experiencias similares que ellos habían tenido. Hay una recopilación de cosas y de evidencias en donde ellos comparaban su vivencia en algún huerto de la escuela y lo que tuvieron ahora. Entonces, eso fue bien interesante también porque allí se pudo ver el impacto que tuvo la intervención de Funda Crecer con un staff joven, con, por ejemplo, la herramienta Cobo, como era a través de teléfonos inteligentes, ellos se emocionaban, se tomaban fotos, todo ese tipo de cosas quedó medido, digamos, con una rigurosidad profesional a través de este sociólogo, esta trabajadora social y el psicólogo con este diseño de la sistematización. Esa era una pregunta, ¿no? Había dos más, no sé si quieren que pasemos de una vez a abordarlas o espero que las hagas.
Yeah, it was. No, it was if this happened naturally or if it was kind of planned and then there was some guidance to parents.
Oh.
Just quickly, because we don't have a lot of time.
Yeah. Sí, ahí hubo una cosa muy interesante que fue el resultado pues del análisis de la sistematización y es que definitivamente, por eso lo colocamos al principio de la presentación, Funda Crecer ya había recibido formación en crianza positiva, ¿no? Entonces allí pudimos ver nosotros, como lo expusimos, el proyecto originalmente no estaba orientado a potenciar esta parte de la protección, pero nos dimos cuenta que entonces estábamos viviendo impactos perdurables de proyectos anteriores, ¿no? Y me trae a colación lo que acabamos de conversar en relación a que es un trabajo de espacio, ¿no? Entonces, surgió de manera natural esta atención a los niños, ese querer involucrar cada uno de los padres a los niños en el proyecto. Lo que hicimos después fue, con esos ajustes, fue volver como a enfatizar todo este entrenamiento o toda esta formación en protección de la niñez, ¿sí? Y fortalecer mucho más al staff de Funda Crecer en herramientas para identificar posibles riesgos de trabajo infantil o de autismo escolar, ¿no? Y para tratar propiamente a los niños. Entonces, partimos de una generación natural, pero que entendemos que es producto de una formación de un proyecto anterior. Y lo que hicimos fue mantenernos observantes de que las cosas se fueran dando en la dirección correcta y deseable en términos de protección de la niñez. ¿Alguna duda adicional? ¿O quedó claro?
No, thank you, Patricia. Yes.
Brilliant. Thank you so much. And I'm sorry that we're running out of time with all of these good questions. Please feel free to keep putting answers and questions into the chat box and we can make sure that you're connected. If you are looking for more resources, there is a page on the Alliance website, which is the Working Across Sectors Hub. And there you'll find information by sector. You'll find information kind of globally kind of integrated, so to speak, across sectors about working together. You'll find our newly released Inter-Sectoral Framework, which is a document on the right. And there's like a 1 or 2 page summary in there and some infographics that make it easy to read, as well as lots of the research that went into building this common approach. A toolkit for language and building awareness about working together. And then, as I said, we have some e-course materials, some videos, and then these buttons, the image on the left, a button for each sector where we're hoping to put in key documents for working with children on their protection, but also with food security or with nutrition and so on. So with that, we have to wrap up. A huge thank you to Boris, Marcello, Leila, and Patricia for putting together these presentations and being with us. We wouldn't have been able to do anything near as rich with just 1 or 2 of you, so thank you collectively. We're going to move to an infographic discussion now before closing out the day. So we invite you to proceed there at the end of this session. But we also invite you to please do a little survey about how the session went so that we can build back even stronger next year. Hopefully having, moved forward on these conversations about integration, joint analysis, joint advocacy, working with donors, and so on and so forth. So thank you, everybody, and hope to see you later today in our closing out.
Thank you very much to Joanna and everybody. The links that you need for the survey are in the chat now, so please do use them. And as Joanna said, there's more infographic sessions going on, and do go to the homepage on Philo where you will find a link to Welo, the virtual coffee space where you will be able to meet more of the attendees and speakers from this excellent event. Thank you so much to everyone, and enjoy the rest of the sessions.